For casual bowlers, the game was the end of the search. For many, there was more. But one man made it his life. They called him Mr. Duckpin, the Wizard, the greatest duckpin bowler to ever live. Nick Tronsky. On December 15, 1910, in the small coal mining town of Minersville, Pennsylvania, Nicholas Tronsky, Duckpin Bowling's beloved son, was born. Along with his 8 siblings, he was orphaned in 1924 when his parents both died suddenly from influenza. It was then that Nick moved to New Britain, Connecticut, and discovered duckpin bowling. Tronsky got his start as a pin boy, setting strings for leagues and high roller pot games at the local alleys.
But a lot of your good duckpin bowlers were pin boys at one time. And it's like golfers, the caddies used to be, and they came home and become good golfers.
When I first went to work, the Depression was on, so I left high school 1 year to help the family out.
I got into setting up pins to make some money, because we only got like 3.5, 4 cents a line back then.
So I used to go downtown with a quarter, get change for it, jingle in my pocket. I used to have about a dozen kids around me. I think I had a lot of money.
And as the nickels and dimes went down the lane, that was his night's pay, and out the back door. Basically, you never saw him.
These pin boys were a galvanized lot. Life was hard, and bowling was inevitably immune to labor laws and civil litigation.
Oh, that was tough. Once you got into the pit, you were told to pick up at least 2 pins at a time. As you became experienced in it, you could pick up 3 pins in each hand, put them in between your fingers, set them up on the pin deck. We tried to race each other, the pin boys, and we could set them pins up in within 10 or 12 seconds. Some of the bowlers did heckle the pin boys were not fast enough, or were not taking care of the dead wood or something. So we in turn would set up more than 10 pins. I think sometimes we try to get 13 pins up there. We would put a spare pin between the 1 and the 5 pin.
But the toughest part of it was trying not to get hit by the pins.
And the flying ducks. And some of them fly pretty good. You know, he had a tough job. There's some of the guys, even back in the 50s and 60s, I mean, they get it down the lane pretty quick.
You ever get hit?
Oh yeah, not in the head though. I still have it.
But Nick Tronsky, even as a pin boy, had more to worry about than flying ducks. The brash and volatile duckpin pro Jack White had arranged a high-stakes match late one night in New Britain when suddenly he lost his bowling partner to a blown knee. In a pinch, White asked the 16-year-old Nick Tronsky, a pin boy, to fill in. They won the match, and Jack White took Tronsky under his wing. Before his 21st birthday, he was named the #1 male duckpin bowler in the nation. He would go on to win that honor 4 more times in his pro career, a career that spanned 4 decades, winning his last crown in 1962 at the age of 51.
Up in my little brain, I always said, well, I'd like to be a #1 bowler like Nick Tronsky, because he was my idol when I was growing up. And he was perfection. To do the things he did with that duckpin bowl was amazing.
I bowled with Nick Tronsky in tournaments.
He was the Babe Ruth of duckpin bowling.
When you walked into a tournament, you didn't ask what the score was. You asked what Tronsky had. That's how good he was.
He was so good, in fact, that he was hired by renowned aircraft propeller manufacturer Hamilton Standard to help the company bowling team. He worked there as a foreman for 37 years. His team won 29 Industry League titles. But unlike the Babe, Tronsky was a man of few words. The Gary Cooper type. Stolid, complex, like a lighthouse keeper or a Hemingway protagonist.
He was quiet. I mean, you talk to him, he'd talk to you, but he'd go by you and not even say hello to you, maybe.
But he'd get up on the lane so cool and collected, and he'd throw down, and if he dropped a strike or he went through the middle for two, he had the same look.
Look straight there. He looked straight there. But I don't know if he ever saw a ball hit the pin.
You wouldn't know if he hit an 88 game or a 188 game. He was always the same temperament, same look on his face.
He may never have come out and said it, but Nick Tronsky lived to bowl. It was once estimated that he rolled over 500,000 games in his lifetime. And in 2000, he was named Bowler of the Century by the National Duckpin Bowling Congress. He died in 1989 of lung cancer, but you could find him on the hardwood or around the alleys right up until the end. Nick Tronsky loved the country, too. He had a cottage in Rhode Island where he'd often visit alone to fish. It was a modest home, and at its threshold was its name, signed in a piece of driftwood, the Duckpinner. On January 1st, 1953, the seemingly unchanging sport of bowling changed forever. The Industrial Revolution of a sport characterized by raw and rugged sentiments and battered pin boys was imminent. And of course, this age of bowling enlightenment had its Newtonian genius. Kenneth C. Sherman, inventor of the world's first automatic pin setter.
They came out with a state law in Massachusetts that saying that you had to be 18 years old in order to set up pins at night because the leagues were running real late. Well, I really believe in that time there, they put their heads together and they says, we better do something about it, and they invented the automatic machine.
The Sherman pin setter was one of the most complex inventions of its time. Its 1,100 greasy, temperamental moving parts syncopate an eternal cycle of duckpin splendor. Established in 1954, the Woodlawn Bowling Center in West Haven, Connecticut, was one of the first houses in America to open its doors, fully furnished with Sherman pin setters. One Woodlawn lifer has been chasing Mr. Sherman for nearly 40 years.
Enter the twilight zone. You know, I was probably 10 years old when I started hanging around here. My mother caught me one day, dragged me out by the ear, and said, "I don't want you hanging around there."
Bob's an interesting guy. He is, he's a fixture here at Woodlawn. I mean, everybody knows Bob Boucher. He knows how to fix everything. There's nothing that he's ever said, "Oh, I don't know what to do with that."
This is my kingdom. This is it. You know, many parts of my life have changed and come and gone, but this has remained a constant. I look at things that have been running for literally 50 years without wearing out, and they pound it day in and day out, and they still just keep running.
Ken Sherman passed away in 1991, and not a single die-cast fitting, not a gasket, not a bushing has been manufactured for his machine since 1973.
They haven't made those machines for 30 years. That's why, with the foresight of fellow members before me, When the other centers, when they shut down, we bought their equipment. We stored it. So now we have spare parts.
Yeah, we become scavengers when it comes to, getting parts from centers that have closed down.
They're very patient, these machines. They'll wait 30 years for you to make a mistake. And when you do, they're right there to bite.
There's nothing more important than having somebody that knows quick fixes when you don't have another part to put on.
You fashion little devices to help yourself.
You can duct tape it and electrical tie it.
And it looks horrible. It looks, like a Frankenstein monster. It's just stitched with shoelaces in not a very neat manner.
And this machine is just amazing at the slop it can have in it, and it still operates.
Sherman pin setters are truly indestructible machines, built to face the test of time. As persistent as the duckpin bowlers who've been beating on them for the past 50 years.
It's just a conglomeration of state-of-the-art 1940s technology.
It's really hard to sit here and tell you how it works.
There's 17 cams, which means you need 17 micro switches to operate these cams.
It's a system of electronic controls with cams,
chains,
belts,
and micro switches.
The only thing more complex than the machine's nuts and bolts is its impact, both advantageous and adverse to the growth of duckpins. The state of today's game hinges upon the puzzling genius and pride of Ken Sherman.
Wow, the curse of Ken Sherman. Is it a curse? Without him, I don't know that the game would even exist. And I guess because of him, it was stymied as far as limited growth.
Mr. Sherman, he was a fool back then. I do know stories that happened that the Brunswick people wanted to buy his patent out.
Brunswick met with Mr. Sherman and made him an offer. And I don't know the numbers, but back in the 50s, it was a pretty good sized number.
And unfortunately, at that point in time, he felt that he could handle all the production that he needed, and he was going to be able to do it himself.
I think Mr. Sherman at the time had no idea of the magnitude of where this could have gone.
I think it just became such a part of him, he didn't want to give it up. Like, it was his baby, and he wasn't going to let a big corporation take it over.
If he would have sold his patent to Brunswick, they would have spread our game. Our game would have moved probably clear to the West Coast.
When Mr. Sherman didn't get involved with Brunswick, they created the 10-pin machine. So now you have 10 pins in 50 states and duck pins in 5 or 6.
I actually got a chance to meet him one time. I was working at a different bowling alley out in Hamden, and just out of the blue one afternoon walked Ken Sherman, the inventor of this thing that has pretty much been involved in my life one way or another for all this time. He had his son with him, who was bringing him on a tour of duckpin alleys that he had installed personally. And it was right near the end of his life. And, I got to shake his hand. That was like a big thrill for me.
Ken Sherman had a dream that it was going to go further and maybe go to the Mississippi River. It was going to go up and down the East Coast and maybe nationwide.
Had Mr. Sherman done this, I think that Brunswick would have not designed a 10-pin machine, or maybe both. And if I offered you as a businessman duck pins or 10 pins, and you see the 4-year-olds that can bowl duck pins, what age can you start bowling 10 pins? I don't know, they've made 6-pound balls. My personal opinion, and a man said one time, if you make a child that's 4 or 5 years old take that 6-pound ball up to that foul line, it should be called child abuse. So 10 pins would have had a tough way to go. But because of the big size of the corporation of Brunswick and the ability to promote and push it, they're where they're at today. And we're where we're at today. And we're still a bunch of happy duckpin bowlers.